Any of you know that face screaming in fear emoji? You know, the one that goes like this? Uh-huh. Will you clap if you sometimes can relate to that face, please? Thank you. I'm not alone, thank you. Unfortunately for me, that was the inner landscape of my emotional world for about 15 years. Debilitating anxiety. Every day, every hour. It took away my happiness and my hope. Eventually, I climbed out of it. And so I am here as an anxiety warrior to help all of you deal with, which I hope is not as great as mine, anxiety, because we all have to deal with anxiety. We all have to deal with fear and stress. So I offer ways that helped me and that I researched. Those are finding your awe, A-W-E, communicating with yourself and others, and tapping into your creativity. So let's start with awe. I'm going to take you to a nice place. Think about the last time you felt awe. Maybe it was listening to a great piece of music, or seeing artwork, or even a beautiful sunset. When we feel awe, what happens to our bodies? Researchers have found it's an interesting thing. Our breathing slows down, our heart rate slows down, but interestingly, our mind becomes sharper and we can make better decisions. Now I'm going to take you to such a great place, stress. So you think about last time you felt stress. Maybe you were having to deal with something with a coworker or a family member that was stressing you out. I think you all know what stress feels like. Our stomachs tighten up, our heart races, especially when we're really under a lot of stress. And continuous stress and anxiety can create chronic illnesses too. Backaches, stomach ailments. I'm sure all of you either have dealt with that yourself or know other people that have. So it's very important to look at ways to deal with stress. So I want to tell you a story about a woman finding her awe. Her name's Natalie, and she was a software coder at her company. Now, she liked her job, she liked her firm, the people she worked with, but I don't know if anyone has worked in this industry before, but it's very competitive. And Natalie started to feel as if she wasn't good enough, as if she wasn't as productive as the other coders in her company. So what did she do? She just took on more and more and more work to prove to herself that she was good enough. But then her passion for her work suffered, and she got very stressed out. And then one day, it just got worse and worse and worse. One day, she was riding her bicycle home from work. It was a summer evening, still light outside, and the art museum was open. It was open on a first Thursday, and she decided she'd always loved artwork, but she never pursued it as a profession. She went in. Immediately, she felt a sense of calm because she was out of the environment where she is feeling that competitiveness and feeling like she had to work. And she was in an environment where people were in a calm state looking at artwork. But she came to a particular painting, and that's where she found her awe. It was a beautiful 1920s oil painting of a woman sitting serenely on a green velvet couch with the sunlight on her shoulders, reading a novel. Natalie had not let herself experience any kind of breaks because when she wasn't working at her work, she was thinking about it at home or getting on her laptop and doing extra work. And it wasn't just the content of letting her know that, yeah, we need breaks sometimes, but also the beauty of the picture that gave her awe. Then she decided to join the art museum. So she'd go on a weekly basis, especially whenever she felt stressed. And then she signed up for an art class to do water painting at her adult education, but not to compete with herself or anyone else, just for the fun of it. Slowly, 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 but surely, she started to get her passion back for her work, for her coding work. It's okay. And in that passion, she started to feel more confident. She started to take on less work and got more proficient in her work. So now we're going to look at why would Natalie finding her awe outside of work help her be more proficient in her work and more passionate. So I'm going to start with a study by the American Psychological Association. And what had happened to Natalie is she had gotten into a rumination cycle, which I know too well. A rumination cycle where she was worrying so much that she was pushing out almost every other thought that was entering her brain. And ruminators are 4 times more likely to become depressed. When you're ruminating and you're depressed, what happens is there's this dome over you, and it creates a kind of thinking where it's hard to reach out, connect with other people because you're so inside your own head, and you're not making the best decisions. Now let's look at a study that specifically looks at awe. And this was a site launched by UC Berkeley. And they did this fascinating study about awe, where they took half the participants and they only thought about awe. They only relived a moment of awe that we were talking about before, maybe listening to a great piece of music or seeing art or a sunset. Then they took the other half of the participants and they thought of a positive emotion, but not awe. All the participants then they read a fictionalized proposal and they answered the same questions. Interestingly, the people who had only experienced positive emotion but not awe were swayed by both the weak and the strong arguments. But the people who thought only of the awe, these people over here, they were swayed only by the strong arguments. So it can be said that awe can sharpen our brain. And they know, studies show again what I said, it relaxes the body. It gives you better decision-making processes. So what I propose to all of you as a homework assignment is not to just wait for awe to happen, but to seek it out on a daily basis. We don't have to wait for those big awe moments. We don't have to climb those mountaintops. We don't even have to wait for the most gorgeous sunset of the month to find it. It can just mean finding your small awes on a daily basis, pushing yourself away from your desk, taking a 5-minute, well, maybe 10-minute walk around the block, depending on how big the block is, and noticing the miracle of the flight of a bird up in the sky, or how a tree can thrive in a small piece of dirt by a busy roadway. So find those awes on a daily basis. Now I'm going to take you to another scenario, another thing that can help you deal with anxiety and stress. And that is self-talk. A lot of the speakers have talked about that today. How much negative self-talk that runs through our brains that a lot of times we're not even aware of. So I have another story, and this is a story about a young woman named Julie. And she so bravely wrote her piece in the Social Anxiety Network blog. Julie was naturally shy, had been her whole life, nothing wrong with that. But in our culture, we reward people that are more extroverted. And so she had been put down for being a quiet, shy person. By high school, the other kids were calling her a zombie. By her 20s, yes, she was married with a child, but her life had gotten so small because of her negative self-talk. All the negative things she was telling herself, she had to quit her part-time job because she could hardly deal with the public. The sad thing is, she could hardly even go to her child's games because she was so wrapped up with all the negative self-talk. Even her kid even noticed that and said, "Mommy, what's wrong? Why do you look sad when I'm on the field?" So Julie knew she had to do something. And she discovered cognitive therapy. It was a blessing to her. She said for the first time in her life, she could think rationally. Imagine that. All before that, she couldn't, it was too irrational. All those negative talk were just bogging her down. So here's your other assignment, is catch those negative self-talk statements. And we all have them. And what I recommend is to get yourself a special notebook, because studies have shown when we write things down, we remember them more, and we give ourselves the time to think things through. You have a column of negative self-talk, or however you want to title it. Negative statements, false statements. And then you have another column that says positive, realistic statements. So for Julie, one of her negative self-talks was, everyone must think I'm an idiot. And a lot of times that negative self-talk is false. So she replaced it with the more productive, positive, realistic of, not everyone doesn't have to expect me to know everything. For me personally, my fears were so horrible, and I thought about them so hard that I thought I was going to make them happen. Self-fulfilling prophecy, right? I replaced that with my fears are so strong I'm going to make them happen, to thoughts are just thoughts. So that's what I did for that. So I highly recommend that exercise. So now I'm going to go into your communication, not just with yourself, but with others. And how could that decrease stress and anxiety? There's a psychologist named David Caruso who studies emotional therapy. And he says, especially in our culture, we're so taught that no matter what we're going through, we're going to put up a tough front and pull up our socks. So you've had a horrible morning. You've got in a fight with your spouse. You hit traffic. You get into work. You're late for the third time that week, and your boss gave you the evil eye. Coworker walks by. How are you? Our first response is, I'm fine. Maybe don't feel so fine at all, and they go on with their day. David Caruso would recommend using emotion words, more true to our feelings. So what would be the replacement emotion word? Something like, I'm overwhelmed. So you're not going into work as a hot mess. Not recommending that. But you use those emotion words. So what happens when you're more honest with other people about your emotions? There's a couple things. First of all, studies show when we push down our true emotions, we get more stressed out. And they come up and they bubble up in inappropriate ways, and we snap at people. Hopefully, it's our loved ones and they can understand us more. But we have a tendency to become more snappy and irritable when we push those emotions down. So we become more real, and we're opening up ourselves to more genuine relationships. So when you're more genuine with your neighbors, friends, coworkers, then they know they can be more genuine with you. They know they can go to you and talk about what's going on for them. You're developing a whole community of people that are going to be there for you and you for them. And that, folks, decreases stress and anxiety as well. So we talked about awe, communicating with yourself, communicating with others. And then this is the last step, tapping into your creativity. Now, I don't know how many people out here suffer from anxiety, have suffered, but I could make a bet that even if you haven't, you know someone who does. So it's really important to know this. People who suffer from anxiety, study after study shows this, are more prone to be creative. I know this from my own life because it takes a lot of creativity to come up with those what-if statements and what-if thoughts. I know to this day, I went from anxiety from 1 to 10, 10 plus. And all of these steps help me go to about a 3. There's some days that go higher, but I can talk myself down more. But I know even to this day, because I can get really creative, I'll take my dog for a walk, I can think of something horrible, horrible happening to a family member. I'm walking, it's a beautiful day, my dog's happy, I'm crying. It's like, oh my goodness, this was a movie I put in my own head. Boy, how creative am I? So I have to stop myself. So catch yourself. And this is for everyone, though. I don't care how little anxiety you have or how much. Tap into your creativity. That's when you're in your flow. Whether you're at work or you're gardening, when you're tapping into your creativity, that's that time where you're not thinking about anything else. You're not thinking about the fight you had with your spouse. You're not thinking about that loud party that neighbor had the night before that kept you awake. You're in your flow. So find that flow. And you don't have to go play a musical instrument or go take a painting class. Maybe it means thinking outside of the box at your work. Maybe it means rereading the mission statement and communicating to clients in a more clear way. Maybe it means that you have to write reports and you decide to take a short course on nonfiction writing so you write with more clarity. So any way you can find that. Maybe it means you come home and you bake cookies and you give them to neighbors. But tap into that creativity. I want to leave you with a quote that I came up with when I was just coming up out of the ground from my anxiety. And what brought me out of that, by the way, was tapping into my creative energy and writing the book about a woman, a fictionalized book that's not so fictionalized if you know me very well. And this is the quote I want to leave you all with. No matter what you're going through, you are not alone. And hope can fly in on the most unexpected of wings.